Your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to watch in order the entire Mission Impossible franchise. This will self-destruct if you don't listen to this episode. We're watching the entire Mission Impossible franchise on episode 82 of the podcast. Cue the music. Welcome, everyone, to the Entertainment Buffet podcast. I am one of your hosts, Brandon Prosek.
And I'm another one of your hosts, Jessica Kwazz.
We're back, Jess. Summer 2020. We've been busy dealing with a lot of things in the world. But today we're jumping into just the bananas world that is Mission Impossible with Sir Tom Cruise.
Yes, it's much more of a fun world. Even though, there's a lot of impossible things that need to be done and a lot of crazy stunts and the world might explode and whatever. It's a lot more fun than the world we're living in, that's for sure. And in this world right now, where I live in Colorado, we're experiencing really terrible wildfires. Luckily, I don't live anywhere near where the fires are, but it is so bad. There's been acres and acres of land destroyed. And the smoke is everywhere. So you can kind of maybe hear it in my throat a little bit. Breathing in all that smoke and just being around it has made my throat, and many of us out here are dealing with issues from this. My throat is like super, like, I don't want to say sore. It's like almost like sandpaper. It's very hoarse. It's kind of messing with how I talk. I kind of asked Brandon before recording this episode if he could kind of like guide us through it more. I'll still, of course, talk as a podcast. It'd be super weird just silently being a participator. But yeah, if you notice me not talking as much as I normally do, it's not because Brandon hasn't allowed me or I am choosing to take one out. Like, I'm experiencing something really weird right now, as many of us out here in Colorado are. So I just wanted y'all to be aware of that. Like, if I sound different or if I seem a little disinterested in talking, I'm not. It's really just, it's kind of challenging for me to talk properly right now. I'm excited to get into it. It's a bummer that I couldn't, really let my voice be heard, but I'm still very excited to discuss this because this is the first time I've ever watched any of these movies, and I'm ready to talk about them.
Yeah, well, we do appreciate you still powering through on the podcast, Jess, and so I will do my best to guide us along on this mission. But yeah, it's been a bit, guys. We know, like we said, a little bit busy, things going on. So we're going to be breaking this down into two parts. This first part, we're going to be talking about Missions Possible 1, 2, and 3, and then the next part, 4, 5, and 6. So, part 1, we can go ahead and jump right in. And before we talk about Mission Impossible, per usual, we're going to bring up some lately what we've been watching. So, Jess, what's a few things you've been watching lately?
In terms of shows, I just finished Dark. I finished all 3 seasons. Last season, the 3rd season, came on Netflix like a few weeks ago, and so I finally finished the series. It's honestly such a mind-bending ride into sci-fi and quantum physics. Like, it's insane. But if you're into sci-fi, if you're into time travel, if you're into true crime, it has all those elements. And it's just a very well done show. And I really can't say much more than that. Otherwise, I'd be getting deep into the plot. But yeah, if you've heard of Dark or interested in Dark, I would definitely check it out. It's incredible. It's one of the best shows I've ever watched. And the cinematography and acting is just incredible as well. They're selling like really bizarre storylines very well. So yeah, Dark, it's great. And then I moved on to Umbrella Academy, which is just the best. Truly, right? Just great in every way. Like, I'm speechless about what to say about it. It's wonderful. It's season 2 is just a really great way to build up on season 1, which was wonderful already. And yeah, I can't say enough about the show. It's so great. Go watch it. And then, in relation to our last episode on viewing homework, I finished watching The Boys. I think when we were recording, I had like 3 or 4 episodes left to get through. I did. I very much enjoyed it. The ending was very unexpected. I am so curious to see where it's going to go next. I liked everything that happened in the end. The ending was intense and set it up for where it's probably going to go. And yeah, I'm so glad you assigned it to me because I truly, really enjoyed the show a lot more than I thought I would. And I'm really excited for season 2, which should be here, I think, in September. So just a few weeks away.
Yeah.
So, wonderful show. And then in terms of movies, I watched The Old Guard, starring Charlize Theron on Netflix. I enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I would too. Charlize is fantastic in action movies, like truly. It's always fun to see her in that role. And it was a very different take on like, superhero genre, so I enjoyed it. And then I also watched Hamilton on Disney Plus, the live production of it. I never saw it in theaters, but of course I remember like the phenomenon that was surrounding Hamilton when it came out in 2016 on Broadway. And I totally see why. Like, I totally get it now. I completely get it now. It is honestly a work of art. It is like a masterpiece. It is, and it is definitely groundbreaking in terms of what is on Broadway. Everything in terms of the set pieces, the costumes, the choreography, the acting, every piece of it is powerful and beautiful. The soundtrack is just unbelievable. And I get it. Like, I totally get why there's a hype. I'm definitely late to the game, but like, I'm a little bit in that hype too. So yeah, I would say even if you're not really like a musical theater person, I think you could definitely enjoy it. It's fresh, it's different, and it's just wonderful. And a lot of the cast is kind of finding other work to do now, and I'm really excited to see what they go off and do. Yeah, I was blown away by it, and as soon as I finished watching it, I was like, oh, okay, that's why. Yep, I'm in it now. I get it.
Nice. Well, yeah, good mixture. I've also been dabbling in some things as far as TV show goes. Also, Umbrella Academy. Amazing.
Great. Yep.
So much so we agreed how much we loved it. We're going to do an episode about that soon just because, yeah, season 2 was even better than season 1, and season 1 was already great. Can't say enough about that show. So much so we're going to do an episode about it. So, I, way late to the game, watched Tiger King.
Oh, welcome. Yeah.
Yeah, I had put it off because, like, I feel like when a show drops and, like, everyone's talking about it, if you don't watch it in the first week or two, I feel like it just gets a little overhyped and, like, everyone's talking about it. And, like, I was afraid of getting spoiled, so I was like, well, if I don't see what everyone's talking about and don't understand the references, like, it's not spoiling. And so, like, I just waited. And then finally watched it, and yep, if you've seen it or heard about it, it's exactly what you expect. It's bad shit. So there's so much to say on that, but it's just bonkers. Yeah.
So, question: now that you've
Sure.
watched it, like after everything kind of blew over with the excitement around it, do you think like the buzz around it and the like just sheer like insanity trying to understand what this all is, like, do you think that makes sense now why it blew up as big as it is?
I mean, I see why, because also it dropped at the perfect time.
It did.
I wonder how many people would have watched this if this was in like the pre-COVID world, but it dropped like right around when it was starting, when everyone was staying home and came across it, and so I think that's what helped kind of blow up the numbers a bit. I'll admit, I think towards the end it felt like it was dragging, not in like a awful way, but like Not to say that, like, oh, there wasn't enough crazy shit, because, like, there was plenty. But I just felt like towards the end, and that's the problem with a lot of docuseries that are, like, over a handful of episodes, when there's, say, like, 7 to 10 range, it starts to wear on you towards the end. Like, there was times where I needed breaks between episodes. Like, I didn't want to binge this because I didn't feel great after. So, like, I'd see one and be like, I need to watch something more fun after that. Just because, like, it was sometimes entertaining how crazy it was, and then other times I'm like, there's dumb people like this in the world, and yeah. So
do you think Carol Baskin killed her husband?
Oh, I totally think she did. I totally think she did.
Yeah, I would have to agree with you on that.
Because it's like, who else would? You know, like, almost no one had I don't know. I don't want to get too into that, but I think she totally did. Yep. And I think she's just better at playing the game, if you will, than Joe was. Joe was like a more bombastic, almost like I want to say like a Joffrey type, where he's just like, I want to be like this. Whereas like Carol was more like I don't want to say a Cersei, but, you know, she like was like, well, if I play this angle, people will feel bad for me, you know?
Yeah.
So, like, I think they're both crazy in different ways. So is that Doc guy. And they're all nuts. Yeah, so other show I watched...
Wait, I'm sorry. Can I do a really quick sidebar?
Sure.
Because this actually just happened recently. So I'm sure if you haven't listened to it or seen the music video, I'm sure you've heard about WAP. Music video is super fun. It's great. I love it. And in it, they're like in this kind of like funhouse mansion situation, and they actually have like big cats in it. And so Carol Baskin took issue with the WAP music video, and like did this like long interview about how like Cardi B is like abusing animals. Anyway, it was like, why, like, just very much her to insert herself in something she doesn't belong in at all. But my favorite part of it was Cardi B's response to it on Twitter.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna engage with Carol Baskin on that. Like, that's just ridiculous, you know? Oh, Lord. Like, girl, you killed your goddamn husband.
Yep.
Like, I'm not going to engage with you. You're a murderer.
I saw that. That was hilarious. Main thing I have to say, when is the sequel going to come out? Ant-Man and the Wasp. That's what I want. That's what I want to know. But, yeah, I saw that interaction, and it feels like anytime Carol Baskin's going to step up and say something now, everyone's going to be like, shut the fuck up. You know, like, you're nuts.
You're a murderer.
Yeah, you're nuts. And even if say she didn't do it, she still doesn't treat like the animals well, and still making a ton of money claiming that she's this safe haven. It's like, no, if you're a safe haven, you would just have a big wide open range. Like, they would be free, really. Like, they wouldn't be in your caged care still, you making money off of it. But that's for another time if we want to do some sort of Tiger King episode. Other show I checked out, I finally saw season 2 of The Punisher. I put this show off because, like, even season 1, it's kind of depressing. It's a very dark show, very grim, very dark character, but I always loved the character. All I'll say is, like, even though John Bernthal does great work, both acting and the action sequences are amazingly choreographed, it's a little bleak, it's a little brutal, and the problem with some of these Netflix shows, especially in their later seasons, they took probably a 6 to 8 episode story and like stretched it to 13, and it's like, you know, you could have made like a shorter, just non-stop amazing show, and you stretched it to 13 to where by the last few, like, it felt like episode 10, I'm like, all right, it should be wrapping up now, right? Oh my god, there's 3 more, you know. And that's coming from someone who's like very forgivable of a lot of the superhero shows. But speaking of which, I also saw The Old Guard. Loved that.
Yep.
Cannot wait. They have to be doing a sequel. I'm even interested. I'm considering getting the comic books. I love how diverse it is, how queer friendly it is, and it's just great action. It feels fresh compared to a lot of the other superhero and superpowered content out there. Other movies I recently saw, there was one day where I did what I'm calling a Verhafternoon. We watched 3 movies by Peter Verhoeven, I believe how you say his name. RoboCop, Total
Nice.
Recall, and Starship Troopers.
Oh, what a lineup.
That was a Sunday.
That's a good day.
Where I had only ever seen Starship Troopers before. RoboCop and
Oh.
Total Recall I'd never seen before.
See, I've only seen those 2. I haven't seen Starship Troopers.
Yeah, so it's like if you see those 3 movies, you could totally tell they're directed by the same guy. You'll see a lot of actors cross over between the movies, the way the violence is. He says a lot about like class and like different societal things. So it's funny because all 3 of these movies, well, I should say Starship Troopers has been having tons of like direct to video sequels. I don't even know what they're on now, like 5 or some shit. But Total Recall and RoboCop were so popular in like the late 80s that in like the early 2010s, I think it was like 2012 and something like that, they already had remakes, you know?
Yeah.
Both of them had remakes. So I just thought it was interesting to watch this director in multiple different movies that he was kind of known for because they were so stylistic and popular that less than 30 years later they were already given remakes. They shouldn't have been given remakes, but...
I was just going to say, yeah, like the remakes did not do well, but the original ones are still like held up as classics. Like we didn't need to remake them.
Yeah, which one of the funniest moments, if anyone's seen Total Recall, if you want to see it on Netflix, there's a part where Schwarzenegger's running from guys that are trying to shoot him, and he's like, I think first thrust into this whole like, oh, like people are after me thing. He's like going up an escalator, and he moves like just a random person to get in the way so that like he doesn't get shot, and then proceeds to keep putting that person in the way. So this guy's just getting lit up with multiple bullets. And then and I'm like, this poor guy, like he did nothing. This is an innocent person. And then Schwarzenegger picks him up and throws him at the henchman. And I was just like, this poor bastard. It wasn't even a henchman on other henchmen. It was just a passerby. And I'm like, this character is insane.
He's just like trying to have a day. He's got errands to run, and this is what happens.
Which I was watching it with people who had seen it before, and they're like, "Oh my god, I never noticed that." And I like rewound it. I'm like, "No, watch this again. He's the psychopath." But anyway, one last movie I'll talk about before we jump into Mission Impossible. I finally saw Parasite. Ooh.
Yay!
If you haven't, it's on Hulu. Watch it now, or if you don't have Hulu, rent it on Amazon. However you can get a hold of it to pay to support it, or watch it on a streaming thing, you need to, because there is a reason why it won Best Picture, and there's the reason why for the first time in a long time it was a Best Picture winner that a lot of us agree should have won. It wasn't a Green Book situation.
No, not at all.
Yeah, and all I'll say is, because like I believe I posted about how I watched Parasite, and someone's like, I didn't get into it, and I was just like, how far did you get in? They're like, oh, like maybe 20 minutes. I'm like, no, you got to keep watching, because this movie at one point flips on its head, and like you don't know where it's gonna go, and I just love the unpredictability. I love that director. I loved Snowpiercer. I enjoyed Okja. Now I just want to see if there's any other movies of his I haven't seen yet, and I can't wait to see what he does next. And this is coming from someone who hates watching movies with subtitles. Mainly just because I'm a big fan of dialogue and the delivery with the performance, and sometimes jumping between reading and watching is a little too distracting for me. But like, this was worth it. Do it. Watch it. Parasite. So good.
It is. And I would say that Bong Joon-ho's filmography, which I wanted to really take a deep dive into after watching Parasite, is like pretty much consistently great. Like,
yeah.
I don't love Okja, but I love Snowpiercer. I love The Host of his, and Mother is a really good one too. So he's just always kind of pushing out these really, really good films, and I'm excited to see what he does next.
For sure.
We'll see.
But yeah, Jess, we're here for a very specific reason. We took a mission, we accepted it, and we watched the entire franchise in order of Mission Impossible. Now, you mentioned that you haven't seen any of these movies previous to this assignment, correct?
Yeah, I had not seen one of them. Of course, I've heard about him, especially in like the more recent years. Like I was familiar with like the Ghost Protocol, or, like Rogue Nation, like these movies with cool titles, and I know they made a ton of money. But no, I really didn't know much at all about that world at all. And honestly, it wasn't really something I like was actively against watching, but I just never thought I would want to watch. So we had kind of decided to pick like a franchise to discuss, and this was the one that came up. And I'm really glad we settled on this one because I loved them. I loved them. I enjoyed them so much.
Yeah, it's the reason I wanted to do this was because there was a couple films I hadn't seen. I hadn't seen 2 or 3 ever before, so those were brand new. And all the other movies I'd only seen once. So like this was pretty fresh to me as well, but like lately over the last like year or two since Fallout came out and I saw that, I realized how this franchise has taken such a weird journey, and like I've seen a lot of video essays on this as well, you can check out on YouTube, how this franchise has somehow gotten better over the years, and it's learned from its mistakes, it's learned what to improve on, and we're going to go film by film, and I'm going to try to point out things and show how it's crazy because like almost every film has a different director. The main thing that stays along is Tom Cruise, and this started in 1996, and as of this year they're filming the 7th one. I believe they're also going to be doing an 8th one back to back. I don't know that for sure. We'll see with how filming works and everything, but most franchises, as we've discussed on this podcast, get worse. Some get downright awful. Some get so bad and then reboot, all in the time period that like Tom Cruise has been doing this series. So it's just nuts to me how, you know, this came out in a superhero action movie boom, and then it's still survived over these years because like it's just types of action movies that we don't see anymore, or if we do, they're not done well. There's a bunch of garbage movies like the Fast and Furious, Hobbs and Shaw movies, other ones that we probably totally forgot about that are just like, oh yeah, I'm not seeing that shit. So for the long time, it felt like the only action movies to see were the superhero ones. But yeah, we're gonna go through this franchise film by film, and yeah, it's just something that if you haven't given these movies a shot or you haven't seen them in a while, please watch along. If you want to pause the podcast, watch 1 or 2 and follow along with us if you haven't yet. It's well worth it because it's a series you think would have been long dead and is still going, and like I said, defying the Hollywood cards like stacked against it by getting better in time, which is unheard of. So we're going to go ahead and jump in with the first movie, Mission Impossible. So a little background on this. Like I said, this started in, it came out in 1996. It was directed by Brian De Palma. And
which is, I'm sorry, that's crazy, by the way, that it was Brian De Palma.
Why?
Just because I don't know him to do, like, action movies, typically. Like, I don't know. Like, to me, that I was just not expecting that name as the director. So I was, like, taken aback when I saw that.
Okay.
I don't know. It just doesn't, like, fit that, but okay. I mean, it worked.
Yeah, and so one thing I'm going to be pointing out, because it's crazy to me to show, like, the time difference. So one thing I'm going to be bringing up each film is about how old Tom was when this came out. So at this time, he was 34. So obviously, he was still well into Hollywood. He'd done A Few Good Men, Rain Man, you know, all that stuff. Like, he was famous. But I think this was one of his first, action movies like this. And little did we know would spawn such a long-lasting franchise. So one thing just to point out, which I thought was interesting, I didn't know until I researched on it. Mission Impossible was a TV series back in the day. I want to say 70s or 80s. Like it was way pre the movie. And apparently a lot of people were not happy with the movie because they thought it disrespected the TV show. One of the big ones was Jon Voight's character. I forget his character's name, was the only character that was in the TV show. And I mean, spoiler warning, but like his character turns out to be a villain, and everyone's like, "Oh, how dare you!" You know, the TV show, blah 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 blah. But like, I'm not gonna I never saw any of that. That was way before our time. We're just talking about the film franchise because, as people probably saw, it's long surpassed the TV show. Everyone mainly knows it as movies now.
Yeah, I find that interesting too because the 90s were like pretty long before, you know, the resurgence of retellings and redos and reboots. And so it is interesting because nowadays we'll have the like reboot that's a retelling or whatever. So it's funny to think that like back then any sort of diversion from the original source material pissed people off, even though like from what I understand, maybe at the time it was fucking rad, but like I'm pretty sure the show Mission Impossible is notorious for being like super cheesy. So
I'm sure,
you know, makes sense why there would want to be a departure from that.
Yeah, and also just the fact that yeah, I mean, there's a lot of times where a movie's popular and then that spawns a TV show. But I mean, the fact that this was able to give a movie treatment, and like, I think we'll talk about the first movie. I think it was good. I think too many people just were trying to consider it like attached when it's like you really don't need to. We're two people that never watched the show, and plenty of people saw it and didn't care. So, but anyway, let's jump into the first movie. So I thought this one, some things that I really enjoyed. I'd only seen this once when I was like really young, so rewatching it older, it's crazy how many things stuck out to me. One of the big things that stuck out to me is how it opens with just like a bunch of death right off the bat. Like theoretically, you know, Ethan Hunt, Tom Cruise's character, is on a mission. Things are going wrong. All of his teammates are dying, and I'm like, yeah. What a way to like start the franchise is like, we're going to show you this team and then take them all away.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like we'd seen this in a few movies already and then like people dying. It's like, twist. It's just like, how about these people? Nope, they're gone. This is about Tom Cruise, and now he's got to bring in a new team later. And so I just thought for a movie that's such a like kind of ambitious start, I don't know, how'd you feel about that, where it's like, here's Emilio Estevez and like these two women and like they're all on a team, and then boom, gone.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely was super shocked that they just like died, especially because like Emilio Estevez and a few other like sort of known actors at the time were the team, so you would think they would be the supporting characters. Even Jon Voight too, even though he's like not completely gone. When the team just gets compromised and like wiped out, essentially, that was really shocking. And it was very interesting to like just completely change the structure almost of an action movie, and go, like restart it like after the opening sequence. Like, okay, we got to start it over again, and it's only Tom Cruise's character, it's only Ethan. And what he goes on to do from there. And it also was like the start of it too was the start of a very common theme throughout, where something happens, something's compromised, and all the blame could go on Ethan. Which happens a lot. But like,
happens a lot.
It was a very interesting setup to see like how the characters gonna be struggling, not just in missions, but in like also just having to answer for things, and backstabbing and manipulation. So yeah, not expecting that at all.
Well, and what's interesting about it, and like I'm sure there's plenty of action movies who maybe start with a bunch of weird twists at the beginning, but it's crazy to me because it's like we don't really know who Ethan is. Mm-hmm. All we know, based on like possibly rooting for him, is like you said, that he's framed. And so we're rooting for him to try to prove his name. And it just felt like pretty interesting. And it's funny how we'll talk about it later in later movies. It becomes like a kind of a reoccurring trope with his character that everyone blames him. But like that's how the first movie starts. So we don't know who he is. We don't know how good he is. We don't know anything about him because there's just brief scenes where he's hanging out with his crew, and then shit hits the fan very early on. So yeah, so that's one thing that's interesting. We we have this weird kind of twisty thing where we think he kind of has a female love interest in the beginning, and then she gets killed right away. But then he kind of has this weird flirtation with John Voight's character's wife, which I thought was a weird dynamic because to me it just felt very off. And like they even kind of were flirty at one scene prior, and then she comes back. It turns out she's not dead. And to me, I was just like why is this part of it? I don't know. That was one of the things that stuck out as kind of like weird to me out of like the whole movie.
Yeah, no, I agree. I thought that the character was kind of a lot. I didn't care for her. She was very pouty and like everything's sad. But it was weird. It was almost like they were trying to take an element of James Bond and put it into the first movie. You know, Bond gets the girl, like Ethan has a girl, and then she's not. Like, it's just weird. And honestly, the relationship between her and John Voight's character too is also really weird. Like, I don't see them married in the real world.
No, because like he was old, and then she seems, I don't know. He felt like he was in his 50s, 60s, and she was like in her 30s. Like, and I'm sure I'm not gonna judge on age differences, but it felt their chemistry as actors didn't click to me.
There's no chemistry, and yet it was like. She also, not to, like, be whatever about age, but, like, she looked like she could be his daughter. Yes. And she also looked almost, like, even too young for Tom Cruise sometimes. Like, she looks really young. And so that was weird. And the chemistry, like, he's kind of, like, old and boring, and he's, you know, John Voight's character. He's very John Voight. And she's,
he's very John Voight.
He's very John Voight. He's kind of awful, especially now. But yeah, that, so, like, they were trying to kind of shoehorn in this, like, weird, like, she's, because her husband's presumed dead, now, like, oh, she falls in the arms of Ethan, which is just very, again, like, Bond, like, damsel kind of situation, which I thought was, like, lame because she was a part of his team, and then once shit goes down, she almost becomes, like, a damsel, which is, like, wait, where were you girl, you just had all this, like, tenacity. Yeah, then, that was one thing I would say I definitely didn't care for. It's probably, like, one of my least favorite plot points in the entire franchise, actually. Is that?
Yeah. It stuck out to me because, like, there's a lot of, almost, the rest of the movie works, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
So, like, two things I'm also going to point out in every movie that are kind of tropes, not necessarily bad, but just reoccurring things with Mission Impossible is this takes place kind of, like, all over the world. So the two places that it's in it's in Prague and like London, and like those are like the big because I swear like every movie they're in like different countries all over the world. So there's that, and then one other thing is every Mission Impossible movie has a big action scene, and usually, and little did we know when this started, I think this isn't like more apparent until like later when it becomes more nuts, is Tom Cruise started really pushing the idea of doing his own stunts. The two big sequences that are his own stunts are when he's first framed in the beginning and he causes an explosion and like runs out of the restaurant where like the water's coming out. Apparently that was really hard to shoot, and it really only worked with like Tom doing it. Otherwise it was very obvious it was a stuntman. And so that was one. It seems small, but you know, when you actually think that it's Tom doing it, maybe look at it again. And then the ending, like bullet train sequence, where he's kind of on top of the train. They had to clearly do some cheating for that. They're not going to actually put Tom Cruise on like that bullet train with a helicopter coming near it. But yeah, it's those are like the big action pieces, but one I really wanted to point out, which became just like a cinematic staple and has been homaged and referenced in so many things, and that's the him dangling into the room sequence, like where people just call that Mission Impossible, where he goes into this room where it's like impossible to get in because there's like eye sensors and there's floor things and there's like heat sensors based on the temperature of the room, and so like he has to dangle in to like, and it was like a floppy drive or something like that.
Yeah,
where
it's
like
a floppy disk. Like, oh my god!
I was like, oh, take me back to floppy disks. Yeah, and so like that wasn't quite as actiony, but to me it was one of the most tense things because there's the whole thing where the guy holding him, like a rat, is coming near him, and you're like, oh no. So yeah, I think that scene, I totally understand why it became like a staple, not only to do other little dangling scene teases in other movies, but just the fact that like so many movies, like I remember even Shrek 2 as a kid, there was like a part where Pinocchio jumps in somewhere with his strings and it's like Mission Impossible. You know, like so many movies, TV shows started referencing this thing. Like it's crazy that something in the 90s became such a big iconic thing.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, when most people think Mission Impossible, they think that like image. And it is a really cool image of like it's a very quintessential spy kind of image. So it's really cool. And then yeah, if you've like actually seen it, couple it with the fact that that scene is actually really intense. So it's like it kind of makes sense why that's the one that stands out. It's just interesting though that after how much time has passed and how many other stunts and things that they've done, that's still the thing you think about when you think Mission Impossible.
Definitely. So one thing that I want to talk about, that like we'll kind of talk about each movie, is like I think this franchise has, I don't want to say a problem with villains, but like it's kind of hit or miss depending on the movie. Now the big villain of this one was Jon Voight. He's seemingly killed in the beginning, only to come back towards the end in like a twist fashion, and it turns out that he's like a traitor and he's set Ethan up. What's interesting about this is we know that Ethan is framed, but we have no idea who's behind it until I like marking when these things happen. It was an hour and 20 minutes into the movie, and so it's a good portion in to where twist, there's the villain. And it was like, oh, so I liked the fact that like Ethan didn't know and we didn't know, because a lot of other movies we know the villain, it's just about him tracking him and trying to find him or whatever. But like this one, we had no idea. So what did you think about Jon Voight and the general twist and villainy?
Yeah, I do like that idea of we're finding out with him. That adds a level of suspense when we do finding the villain, who's behind this. Just that whole journey adds a layer, especially when it's revealed who it is. I personally find Jon Voight repulsive. So to me, he's the villain of America. So he's also the villain of Mission Impossible. He works as a villain. Yeah, I don't know. I don't like Jon Voight. I can speak about that a lot.
He's got resting villain face. Like he really does. And I think that's what, to me, felt so, like, miscasting for him. Because in the very beginning, when they're all trying to be buddy-buddy, I'm like, and I knew the twist already from when I was a kid, but I was like, I don't buy him. How would everyone not see that this guy, Jon Voight, was clearly bad? You know?
Yeah,
it
like,
just...
even when he's not playing a villain, I feel like he's always kind of got this crotchety look on his face, and it's just always like, so it's, again, that's why it's hard to believe that this like young, fun, energetic woman would be like, oh, hello, to like cranky Jon Voight.
What would have been so much better is if Emilio Estevez's character was the villain, because he's someone who's younger and like matched pairing like with Tom Cruise. So like I could believe when they were all buddies, like it made sense to me. So, like, I think that was a missed opportunity. Clearly, I think at the time they were probably going for the fact that, like, oh, his character Jim Phelps, like, that's from the TV show, and he's a good guy, but twist, he's a traitor.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, but like for us that don't know the show, that doesn't really matter. It just felt like miscasting to me.
Yeah, and I'm glad, like, his time came and went with the first movie and there wasn't more of him.
Yep.
I think for the time, it makes sense to have him as a villain and be a prominent part in it. But now we can all do without Jon Voight. This is
Yes.
my hot take. No
Yeah.
disrespect for his younger years or anything, but like, yeah, whatever. He didn't, to me, like, he didn't add anything special or different as the villain. It was just like, yeah, I'm the villain, and it's like, yeah, no, we see that, like, yeah, for sure, I get it, like, and it's not like, as we'll go on to discuss later, some of the other villains who were there, who sometimes it was a twist that they were a villain, and then you kind of like, oh, I didn't see it before, but now I see it, or it's just, yeah, his villain role was kind of just like, yeah, that fits you, like, yeah, probably didn't have to do a lot of acting. Yeah, but I did like the suspense of trying to figure out who it was, figuring out who it was. Now we got to do something. Like, I did like that structure, as a, like you said, opposed to most action movies where it's like the villain's introduced in the first like 5 minutes, and now we got to find him and fight him.
Yeah, I agree. I'm glad that they didn't drag out his character. It was done. It was over with, and we can move on. But honestly, besides the Jon Voight's character or the wife being kind of weak points in the movie, I feel like pretty much everything else worked. I think also this is where they introduce Ving Rhames, who he turns out to be the second most used person in these movies. And so, yeah, I mean, any other thoughts on this first movie? I really enjoyed it. I think especially the 90s, which was filled with action movies, I think that a lot of the movie still holds up. It may not be as many gigantic big action scenes like the later films go to, but as just like a good little spy movie, I thought it was fun.
I did too. I really enjoyed watching it. Yeah, it's very of the time, especially when they're dealing with technology. Like, that's, and it's kind of, it gave me giggles. It's like just seeing their high-tech technology. But other than that, yeah, like, I do think it holds up. I do think it's just fun, enjoyable. I didn't really find much wrong with it or anything. Like, I don't think it needs, like, intense criticism in any way. I think it's a good start to this franchise. I don't think when they were making it at the time they realized how long the franchise would go, but I do think it's a good beginning to introduce Ethan Hunt and his journeys. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. And I also really enjoy watching like kind of like campy 90s 80s stuff, but this wasn't, I would say, like campy or even cheesy. It comes off very well. I think it has aged pretty well.
Yeah, I agree. So we're going to move on to Mission Impossible 2, which we'll get into is weirdly the complete weakest film in the franchise.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which almost, it probably could have killed the franchise. I think for many years people thought the franchise was dead. We'll talk more into it, but I'll do a little background. So Mission Impossible 2, this came out in the year 2000. So now Tom Cruise is 38. This was directed by John Woo.
Yes.
Which if you don't know
Yes.
him, he did Face Off. Yeah, he has a very distinctive style with action. But yeah, so this movie, also had a younger Tandy Newton.
Tandy Newton, Baby Maeve. I was
This-
so excited to see her. I had no idea she was in it. Obviously,
Yeah.
it's like very early on in her career. I was pumped when I saw her on the screen. I just screamed, "Baby Maeve!" at my screen. I was so excited.
Yeah.
Love her. Love her in everything she does.
So this movie, it starts off with a big I don't want to say action because it wasn't really like there weren't stakes, but it was just to show how Tom Cruise wants to give us crazy stunts, and he wants to die if he can't give us like the best action scenes ever. So the scene opens with this cheesy sequence where he's free climbing, which he actually did. They didn't do any nets because it would have like ruined the shot. Like he had like a strap or whatever, but like it was super dangerous. So like just imagine a lot of those scenes where it's like kind of like nail biting if you're afraid of heights. Just the fact that Tom Cruise is like, yeah, I'm gonna do this pretty unsafely, and it's like this is the opening credits. And like the fact that every film at some point there's like a mission should you choose to accept, and like Ethan does it in different ways. I think this time it was like sunglasses. There was like a helicopter that flew over, shot a missile, the missile stuck in the ground, out came the sunglasses, he puts them on, watches the mission, then tosses them away like into the camera, slow-mo, explosion, Mission Impossible 2. I was like, oh boy, we're in for one here.
We're in it. And he's got his long, shaggy hair, which I gotta say, he looks dope in. I love the long, shaggy Tom Cruise hair, because it's just like, yeah, I'm rocking it. What's
blowing
up?
In the wind,
Blowing in the wind with sunglasses and fire. He's like ready to go.
Because that's a trope that John Woo loves, is slow-mo and like wind blowing in the characters. So like if that scene doesn't tell you the tone for the whole film, I don't know what else does, because that is like watch that opening scene. If you're like, this is so silly, it's gonna be that the whole time. Like it just straight up is. But yeah, so I had to point out that opening sequence because I was like, dear God.
Yep.
The fact that he wants to do free climbing just for the credits, no stakes.
No
and
stakes.
It seems like this is what just Ethan Hutt does on his free time for fun. Is like, I'm gonna risk my life climbing a mountain. With like just powder on his hands, like no, yeah. Anyway. I had to point out the fact that he did that stunt with no net, just the harness.
That's insane. For that, too, for that moment. Like, that's what it was. Okay. Wow.
He needed it to look good, Jess, okay? So this film introduces, like we said, Tandy Newton's character, who becomes very quickly a love interest.
Yeah, okay.
I thought this was very rushed.
Very fast. There was, so I took notes of this while I was watching, and I just understood what this meant. There is a shot of, like, somehow she's kind of, I don't know what led up to this, but she's, like, kind of straddling him. I think they were, like, fighting or something, or they were fighting other people on accident. There is such a disgusting shot, and it's just very, like... very Woo style, like, like she's somehow on top of him, almost in like sitting on him, and the camera is pointed down in such a way that it's like flat down on them. Her boobs are in the foreground, and then it's his face, so it's just like boobs, Tom Cruise face, and it's just wow. Very of the times, very inappropriate. Do not like that.
2000.
2000.
Sex sells, baby.
Yeah, I'm noticing a lot of my notes from watching this is very nonsensical, but also makes all the sense in the world. Like, I have, the music in it is wild. I don't remember what the music in it was wild, but it was wild.
I wrote down that too. Cheesy music. It's such late 90s, early 2000s cheese. That's the main thing. Like I said, that opening sequence, like she said, with the boob shot on Tandy, all that stuff. This felt like, oh my God, this is like every other action movie that came out in that time period. It doesn't stick out at all. It felt like, I remember as a kid seeing the commercials and even and at the time I was 8, even thinking just like, like, cause it just looked over the top, and so another fun fact about this movie is, so the villain, Dougray Scott, he was supposed to play Wolverine in the first X-Men.
Oh.
But because shooting for this movie took too long, and I believe he got injured on a motorcycle stunt, he pulled out and they had to replace him with Hugh Jackman.
Wow. And everything
Talk about
was
the
right in
best
the world.
mistake ever.
Yeah.
Because I did not like Dougray Scott in this. I don't know what else he's done. I need to see him in something else. Maybe it's just this movie. It's a cheesy John Woo movie. But I did not like him at all. When I saw him in this, I'm like, oh, thank God for Hugh. Oh, thank God.
Right.
You know, because Hugh went to play Wolverine for 17 years in like a handful of movies. And Dougray Scott, it's like, do you know who he is compared to Hugh Jackman?
Right.
That just shows, like, thank God that happened. Thank God this movie ran over in time. Because that could have really hurt the X-Men, not only the X-Men franchise, but possibly superhero movies. So little did we know Mission Impossible 2 played a big effect in the superhero boom.
Wow. I mean, good for everyone else, bad for Dougray Scott. That sucks. I would be pissed if I, like, couldn't do Wolverine and then I was stuck in this crap movie.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
pissed.
like, based on his based on his filmography, he definitely kept getting work. I don't know if the quality of work was great, but it just shows that, like, it's funny how such a minor thing, like, celebrities miss movies or overshoot with movies and have to pull out of other movies so often. But man, like I said, what a critical thing. So yeah, I mean, I will say some of the motorcycle stuff is pretty cool. But like that final scene with him and Tom on the beach, the part where they ride their motorcycles into each other and, like, I think they explode and they leap into the air and tackle one another. It's
a long sequence. Okay, first of all, before we get into that, though, because it's the end, we just spoke about the end and then jumped to the beginning.
Sorry.
But the reason is they fly through exposition in this movie. They just, like, zoom plot. And watching it, I was like, I literally have no idea what's happening. Like, I don't know what's going on. I know there's a villain and they're doing stuff. But, like, the plot,
yeah.
I don't know what it was. Because they just, like, zoomed into it and then just went into the action. So, like, literally for me, all I mostly remember is the beginning and the end. Because everything else that happened was so, like, warp speed fast that I have no idea what happened. I don't remember what they did.
Yeah. So, one thing I'll say, another reoccurring trope or element in the Mission Impossible franchise that I believe was from the TV series is the mask reveals. I forgot to mention that in the first movie where someone is Tom Cruise or someone is with a mask, but it's like you can totally tell it's like the actual actor. It's not a real mask, but they pull at their neck and then they Scooby-Doo villain style take off their mask, and then it's the totally different actor. And it's something that's in all the movies at one point, but the crazy thing about this one is they did it way too much. I remember thinking, like, how many times are you going to do these mask reveals? It became predictable. And, like, to me, anytime something crazy happened, I was like, what, is they going to be under a mask? And then, I'm like, yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Great.
One of my notes is literally so many masks. So many masks. That's all I remember about the plot. It was just masks on masks on masks. And not the COVID kind, the face kind.
Yeah, masks central in this movie. This took place in Australia. Like I said, these movies take place all over the world. But yeah, it flies through things. I think it's a just horribly written movie. There's even like a line where Anthony Hopkins plays like the new guy that's like in charge of Ethan. And he's just like, well, if it was mission difficult, you know, but like what was the line? It was something like, well, they don't call us mission difficult, you know,
right?
Like,
or something like yes,
something like that. Where I was like, oh my god,
it
shut up,
Mission
Anthony
Impossible
Hopkins.
or something. And also, can I just say, Anthony Hopkins' voice? I don't know what was happening there, but to me, I was like, trying to figure out what, like, accent or cadence he was going for, because usually, you think Anthony Hopkins, you think of his iconic voice, but he, like, didn't do that this time. It sounded like almost like Brooklyn-ish, but then it was going, like, in and out. So that was weird too, because, like, one thing about Anthony Hopkins is, like, his voices are never bad. So that was jarring as hell too, trying to figure out, like, what did they tell you to speak like? How did we get here?
Yeah, it was just odd too, because like this is such a big actor and he's in a pretty bit role.
Yeah.
He's barely even in the movie, and it'd be different if it's like, oh, he's a bit role and he's in like all the movies, but this is like the only one he was in.
Mm-hmm.
So it just felt like very useless for getting such a big actor to be that role. Yeah, I just, a lot of the casting, like we were saying, when it comes to Dougray Scott or like Anthony Hopkins in this role, Tandy Newton, she, obviously we know she's a good actress, but she was not given much to do. It's weird because like she was the damsel, but then she has a moment where she's like, I don't want Dougray Scott to get the poison, so I'm going to put the poison in myself. And it's just like, so you give her a badass moment, but then she's still the damsel because Tom Cruise has to save her.
Right.
You know, she doesn't help save herself with him. She's still the damsel. And I'm like, you were trying to do something somewhat non-damsel-y, and you proceeded to do a damsel thing anyway.
Yeah, I feel like after the first two movies, they handle female characters way more well.
Yeah.
This was ridiculous.
Well,
Poor Tandy.
that is something that's going to come up later, because after the third movie, we'll talk about more later, Tom Cruise actually said no more women damsels.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's awesome.
Yeah, apparently he was just like, yep, no more of that.
Yeah.
I don't even think it's because he kept doing it. I think he just was like, we don't need that. We'll do some more badass women.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, so it's interesting because, like we were saying before, they rushed this love interest between Tandy and Tom Cruise, and then she's the damsel. He saves the day. They seemingly end up together, only for, spoiler warning, she's never in the rest of the franchise.
Never talked about again. Again,
Never even mentioned.
Never mentioned. Not even like a, hey, where'd she go? Nope, she's fully gone. Again, I think it was like a taking a piece from Bond. You know, maybe they were trying to go for like, oh, he's got a love interest every movie at first, because that was like, I mean, what, we were in like Pierce Brosnan Bond then, right? Like,
Yeah.
And those movies, I mean, they're always still huge, but those movies especially were like really leaning on like the Bond always gets a girl at the end of the movie. Blah, 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 blah. So I think that's probably what they were going for with this, which sucks because, like, you know, Tandy Newton deserves more, but like it's very of the time, you know, for sure.
The only other person that returns again is Ving Rhames as Luther, and it's interesting because so many of the either bosses of Ethan or the women or whatever other characters filter, but the main people that stay along, at least in this beginning portion, are Tom Cruise and then Ving Rhames in a supporting / like buddy role.
And I love him.
Yeah.
I just love him, especially in this. He's just like this nice little like warm hug that comes out of the movie, and he's like, hey bud, how you doing?
And this is right around the time, late 90s, early 2000s, when he was like in everything.
Mm-hmm.
But it's funny because Tom Cruise seemingly doesn't age. Ving Rhames, you'll notice over these films, definitely ages. Like, no offense to him, but, you know, 20 years pass, and, you know, by the end of this, he is like 60, and you can tell.
And he's not drinking that Xenu blood that, you know, Tom got, so...
Well, yeah, he doesn't have that thing that, like, Ben Stiller and, like, Paul Rudd and Tom take to, like, not age. He didn't get in on that. But anyway, I bet a big reason that they don't mention Tandy Newton's character is because they want a lot of people to forget about Mission Impossible 2.
Yeah.
I think it really could have killed the franchise, and luckily, and when we're going to jump into Mission Impossible 3, someone else took it in a different direction and kind of steered it towards the right path, because First film, good. This movie, what the fuck happened? Like, most franchises, when it gets this bad, that's like the last movie. You know what I mean? Like, if many movies, it's like the first movie's good, second movie's okay or better, but then the third movie, what happened? You know, the second movie, it's just like good, bad, whoa.
Yeah, very excessively, very quickly terrible. So let's talk about that final scene, the iconic final motorcycle with abs.
Yep. Lots of
the longest motorcycle situation in cinema history.
It felt like it.
It felt so long.
Well, in later movies, we'll talk about it. There's motorcycle sequences that don't feel like this.
No,
it's
and they
just
are long.
This one,
but
yeah, they are long.
They're exciting.
But they're exciting. They're shot well. This was just like John Woo being John Woo. There's lots of scenes. Also, big thing I want to talk about in addition to the motorcycle thing is there's other movies where there's some shooting, but that's not like the big thing. This movie, John Woo fashion, tons of shooting, tons of sliding on the ground, slow-mo shooting, hairs in the breeze, you know. It just... This felt like a John Woo movie that he got to put Mission Impossible's name on it, and it didn't feel like part of like what ended up being the franchise.
For sure. Yeah, no, it was very... And I think it's probably because of the time. Like, that was the hot thing with action movies, was like guns, 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 motorcycles, woo, and not like actually unique, thoughtful choreography, cool stunts. Yeah. It was just like, this is working for this movie, let's do it over here. You know, this is basically Mission Impossible Face Off. Like, let's be real. But right. I also noticed there was a lot of really weird zooming in, like slow-mo ab zooms during the gun battle, I wrote. So, like, it's also really weird because it's, like, these very, like, lame kind of action moments, but then they're also hyper-sexualized as well, which is, like, yeah, that's the early aughts. Like, that makes sense. And then, I don't know if you could help me make sense of this. I have a note that says, the pigeon kick scene was so extra. Do you know what that means?
I mean, John Woo is known for putting pigeons and doves. Like where they'll run and then they go flapping and it's like all epic. I don't remember them kicking a bird per se.
I think someone kicked a pigeon in this movie because I wrote the pigeon kick scene was so extra.
I just love that note. So extra.
So extra.
Okay, so one thing I will say before I forget, because I loved looking up which stunts he did, and this one I had no idea was like a stunt. So you know at the final fight scene, and maybe it was like in the sand where there were birds or whatever, but there's a part where Dougray Scott has Tom Cruise on the ground, and he goes to stab him, and the knife goes like right before Tom's eye, and it's like a deep close-up of the knife being like inches away. Apparently that's real. Apparently they put the knife on like a string and measured out like how far to get it near his eye and really did it. And I was just like, so unnecessary. Because
that's so unnecessary.
The reason why it's unnecessary is because like, okay, later films when he's hanging off planes or buildings seems real. This seems like just movie magic like most things. So like, do you think in the trailer, like... that's unnecessary stuntage to me, just like the rock climbing thing, because it's like we don't know unless you watch behind the scenes, read about, or like see an interview and Tom talks about it or something. It's like we don't know that it's real, so why risk it if we don't know?
And it's like there's not much payoff for either of those stunts. It's not like groundbreaking cinema. It's like you climbed up a mountain wall thing and then you had a knife real close to your eye. Like, what? Like,
yeah, I swear he has a death wish.
I'm sorry, they had like a string that held the knife by his eye?
So yeah, apparently there was like a cable or something at the bottom of the knife so that when like Dougray Scott or whoever it was, maybe it was a stuntman, goes to stab Tom in the eye, it like stops the knife.
Okay.
And they measured like if Tom sits his face here and his eye is about here, this is where the knife is, to where it's close enough in the shot. So, like, that's how long the cable is. So it's like almost like it retracts, you know, and it doesn't quite get that close. But it's like, why risk stabbing Tom Cruise in the face?
Why not just get like a fake knife? Like, what?
Like every other movie.
Yeah, what? That was, a little unnecessary. not like a huge payoff. It's not like that's like an iconic moment where you're like, oh my god. Like,
right?
Okay.
Like, when I saw that, out of like, because I was reading all these articles and watching videos about all the stunts that he did for these movies for research, and when that came up, I was like, why? Because no one knows. Like I said, when he hangs off planes or buildings, at least some of the times that's for a plot point, but also it's like, oh my god, Tom Cruise hanging off a plane. But like this, no one's gonna be like, oh, Tom Cruise almost stabbed himself in the eye. Like, no one knew that. It's so unnecessary, and I just had to bring it up.
I didn't know that, and that makes the movie even more ridiculous.
Right? That, hey, him climbing the mountain for the credits and him almost getting stabbed in the eye, those are some of the big, you know, and I'm sure he did a lot of the motorcycle work, but it's just like, woof, almost killed the franchise. And what's crazy is, like, people ask, like, should I see all these movies? And, like, I honestly say you can skip two.
Yeah.
If you unless this is the type of tone and type of movie you want to see.
Yeah, I would agree with that. You know what I mean?
Like a bad movie night, I think this could fit in.
For sure. Like, if you like cheesy, stupid, campy, weird movies like we do, like, because I thoroughly enjoyed it. Even though it's garbage. It's complete garbage. It's terrible. I enjoyed the hell out of it.
Do I want it on my DVD shelf? No, but I'm glad I watched it.
And if I, like, rewatch the franchise again, I'll probably skip it. So, like, yeah, if you want to watch the full franchise, go for it. But, like, if you think 2 is going to be garbage and you don't like garbage, then just go to 3. Like, literally nothing of 2 carries over into 3 at all. Like, there's
nothing at all.
Nothing at all. You can just completely take it out and you're fine.
Yeah. There's no references. It's almost like some of the TV shows where it's like you can just watch any episode. There are some movies where, like, you can't do that in this franchise, but 2 can literally be, like, removed from existence, and you only watch 1 and then 3 through 6, you won't know a difference.
No, nothing. Which, wow, that says quite a lot about a sequel.
Right? So, anyway, let's move on to the final film we're going to talk about for this episode, which is Mission Impossible 3. So, background about this movie. This came out in 2006. That means we are now 6 years after the last movie, and total 10 years after the first. Tom Cruise is now 44. This was directed by J.J. Abrams, which was his film directing debut. He had done, like, Alias, and apparently that's what Tom Cruise watched and thought, like, let's get this guy. So, weirdly, at some point in 2002, I think, David Fincher was in consideration.
Wow.
Which, right? I think would have been really weird because he had done, like, Seven and Fight Club and then Mission Impossible 3. You know. Anyway. So, that's kind of where we start is... And one thing I want to point out, I think, in the history of, like, kind of action movies is this is the first that I'll just say is in a post-Jason Bourne movie world. Because, like, Bourne movies started this whole shaky cam and handheld for action sequences. And you can totally tell that like, kinetic handheld style imprinted onto this movie. Not even so much later movies, but mainly this one, because that's what was popular in, like, the early to, like, later 2000s, is that style of action cinematography. So I wanted to point that out because, like, I don't know if you saw that it was like, this feels very Bourne. Yeah,
I definitely noticed there was, like, a hint of that for sure. And that's what's interesting too about, like, the first pieces of the franchise. They kind of are going along with, like, action movies, or they're taking, you know, liberties with other action movies that are successful and exist, and throwing them into their environment. But yeah, this definitely did have like a Bourne kind of feel to it, but it was still very much, Mission Impossible. But yeah, I did pick up on that. I definitely could see that.
Yeah. So what this also does to the series is Vin Rhames also comes back as Luther. We introduce Michelle Monaghan's character, who is a brand new love interest out of nowhere.
Fuck Tandy Newton.
Yeah, fuck Tandy Newton. I've tried to like find articles like why she wasn't in it, and I can't.
So, okay.
Oh, do you know?
Kind of. So she recently did a interview. Let me see. Hold on. Let me look it up, because she did this like, it was a few weeks ago. She did a really like very truthful interview where she spoke in depth about like racism or misogyny that she was feeling in the industry, and she didn't like say that Tom Cruise was that or anything, but she does bring up her work on Mission Impossible.
We introduce Michelle Monaghan's character, who is at the start of the film already been with Tom Cruise, like they're engaged, and it's
I found it. Sorry. Okay, so this is from a Vulture. This is from a Harper's Bazaar article that is sourcing the Vulture interview she did. Okay, so here's the tea. Newton described her experience working opposite of a really stressed and dominant Tom Cruise on the 2000 film Mission Impossible 2. When asked why she never filmed another movie in the action thriller franchise, the Westworld actress merely said, "Oh, I was never asked. I was so scared of Tom. He was so very dominant individual. He tries super hard to be a nice person, but the pressure, he takes on a lot. And I think he has this sense that only he can do everything as best as it can be done." Like, he didn't like her. Like, he was a very stressed out individual at the time, and got frustrated by her, and then he didn't seem very collaborative, and then it was just like, you know what? We don't need her. Bye.
Which, to be fair, like, I'm not going to defend anyone's actions as far as that goes, but an interesting point in like his career was like, he did Jerry Maguire after Mission Impossible and like Eyes Wide Shut, but then like I could totally understand like he probably wasn't in like the best graces. I don't know when exactly he did that whole Oprah thing or whatever.
I think it was like around then, maybe.
And so like I could totally see he had a lot of pressure doing like a second movie maybe, and like he was worried about like the franchise.
And the Scientology of it all, that's very real. Like, so, I mean, yeah, like, I don't doubt what she's saying or discredit her, but I also don't think that makes Tom Cruise a monster. I think he's probably, like, just a very intense guy on set, because he's been doing it for so long, and he
puts his life on the lines, almost stabbing himself in the eye
well,
for our entertainment.
Like he says goes. You try almost stabbing yourself in the eye,
right?
But yeah, too, and also this is like he's a producer on it. He's the face of this franchise, so like things, don't go right. Even though, come on, that I'm sure she wasn't the problem of the second movie, but whatever.
Yeah,
like
I think it probably comes down to both like a chemistry thing with the person, and maybe they thought years passed, and like since their love, quote unquote, was so rushed in that movie, maybe they felt like enough time has passed that either people didn't like the second one, didn't care about the second one, they wanted to start fresh and think like, well, maybe those two kind of like high-strung badass individuals wouldn't have worked. Because the thing about Michelle Monaghan's character is, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but she's just a normal person. Like, she's just a nurse. She's not in the spy world. She's not like some big badass. Like, Tandy Newton was like a thief and a badass. So maybe they thought like this is a new start for Ethan, where he also at this time has retired and he's just like an instructor, which is so funny because at that time, that was 2006, and now here we are, he's filming a movie in 2020 where like he's still in duty. So it's funny how even in 2006 they're like, yeah, now he's like retired. It's like,
right.
No.
But I also feel like the third movie, like immediately just set a different tone from the other two. Like this was like a departure. like, is just completely different from the first two in general. And so it makes sense to why they just would want to leave all that kind of behind them, with the exception of Ving Rhames, because, I mean, he's great and we enjoy him in it. But, like, yeah, it's also, like, the character is different in his own way, and now this, like, it's just a different way of dealing with it. I think from the third movie on, they didn't want to do the traditional, like, James Bondy kind of, like, extra spy movie. Like, they wanted to do their own thing. So
yeah, and they wanted to tell a story where Ethan was, I think, trying to move forward with his life. He was like you said, retired from, like, what do they call it? From field duty, and was just training operatives. He was doing that secretly. He hadn't told Michelle Monaghan, her character, about that. So I think he just wanted to start fresh, and, like, this was a movie how, like, he can't quite have a normal life, where the villain takes her hostage at one point, and, like, this is where it's full on damsel in distress. But this also introduces Simon Pegg's character Benji, who would become someone else who stays around for the rest of the franchise. So a couple big action sequences I just want to mention is when he's on the bridge and they're, like, shooting missiles at cars. I remember the trailer and, like, commercials on TV back in the day where, like, the missile hit and he flies, like, into that car. It's like, ooh, Jesus Christ. Like, he did that.
Oh.
It wasn't like a missile, but they did the cable thing where they thrust him into the car.
Oof.
Because, apparently he's a glutton for punishment. And also in Shanghai, when they did the scene in Shanghai, he does, like, the big swing thing.
Mm-hmm.
So he's starting to up the stunts, but, like, these felt more in the plot, whereas, like, we were talking about the stunts for the second film where they felt random and pointless.
Absolutely. Yeah, this was, like, more in line with, like, what was going on.
Yes. One thing in this film that sticks out over the rest of the films, and what's interesting is I see a lot of people who haven't seen all the movies, they love this one because of the villain, Philip Seymour Hoffman.
Of course. I mean, truly. Like, I haven't watched a movie of his in a while before this one, so it was just really nice to see him on screen again, doing what he does best. And he was just a fantastic villain. He was entertaining. He was snarky, and God, I miss him every time, he pops up screen. But yeah, he was a fantastic villain. Like, great. I mean, he's always great in every movie he's in, but there's something about Philip Seymour Hoffman playing a villain that's just even more, I don't know, enigmatic. I love it.
Yeah, and there's a point in the film where I really like it because, like, Ethan kind of feels like he's in control. And what's interesting is they introduce another female character earlier on in the movie, and it's kind of a twist when she dies. It's like, oh shit. And then we also possibly think that Michelle Monaghan's gonna die. It's just like, oh my God, you can't have two new women come along and then get killed. And then also, I believe Maggie Q was also... Yeah, Maggie Q, who was in this. So Kerry Russell was the other person. And then Lawrence Fishburne was... and Billy Crudup were the kind of like the leaders of the IMF and kind of like the bosses to Ethan, which was so interesting because it feels like even though some of these people weren't super famous at the time, you look at it now and it's like, oh man, how did this movie just all of a sudden thrust in this huge cast?
Yeah, and then you had Jonathan Rhys Meyers as like another person of Ethan's team, and oh my God,
yeah, that's him.
Did you notice who plays Michelle Monaghan's brother?
That was Aaron Paul, right?
Aaron Paul, baby Aaron Paul shows up like right away and is like, hey brother, and just like sticks around their house. He was so young. Yeah, it was a lot. I mean, there's a lot of big names in this.
Yeah, which now looking at it, that was one of his like he's only been in maybe like a handful of films. So having him in that bit role, it's kind of funny to think where he is now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, so I think this movie, what it did well was, like we were saying, it took the action scenes in a better way. It took the villain in a better direction with a better actor. It took a lot of the cheesiness out of it. It
Yes.
removed the cheese. It went vegan, no, it was still meaty, but it definitely removed the cheese. I'm hungry, you can tell. But it removed the cheese, and it kind of felt like it grounded it a bit more. Obviously, there's a part, like we were saying with the first movie, we're going to see how often this comes up, but like, Ethan's kind of blamed for stuff, and like he's on the run / trying to save the day, and it just it really really worked. Compared to the other ones, it's not my favorite, but I'm so glad that this movie happened, because this was the bridge that's kind of like, no, this franchise isn't garbage. We really sorry about the last one, but like this one is gonna be better.
Yeah,
We swear.
I agree. Like, I think this one really elevated the action, and the stakes also felt much higher than like the first two. So I think you're right. It's the bridge between like the early aughts, late 90s, like that, whatever was going on over there, and then we're gonna make this serious, and then it becomes what it really becomes.
Yeah, and the strange thing is, and like JJ, we could talk about him on like another podcast even, but like he starts this career of taking franchises that haven't been like movies for a bit, and like taking what's good from them and like grounding them and then bringing them back, because he did this to Mission Impossible after 6 years. I haven't seen his new Star Trek, but everyone tells me that his Star Trek, the first one, was really good.
It is.
And then like maybe not so much Rise of Skywalker, but like I loved Force Awakens.
Mm-hmm.
So like when he gets that first movie to kind of bring a franchise back to life, I think he's one of the best in Hollywood to do it, because it's like he picks all the stuff that works and what are staples of what is good about the franchise and elevates it, but then removes the shitty parts of it. So like when you see the second one to this one, it's just like night and day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I feel like another thing, they were a lot better with the mask twists.
Yes, they were. It was good masks use.
Yes, because there's sometimes where it's overused. The last one, like we said, was just like, okay. And this one, it's like, yeah, we still have it, but it's not overused. This took place, like I said, in Shanghai, and also the Vatican were like famous places it was at. Yeah, the one thing that bothered me, and I'm curious for your thoughts on it, because this is a J.J. Abrams trope that he brought into the franchise, and luckily didn't really stay. They keep calling like the bad thing, like the thing that everyone's going for, is like the rabbit's foot. It's some sort of, it must be like poison or a bomb or I don't know, something. It's a mystery box thing, and they don't reveal what it is at the end.
Yeah, that's like it's so weird too, because it is something that, like, I guess that's not the point. What it is, it's the journey. That's the point.
I know, but come on.
Yeah, like, come on. We've been talking about this for so long. I want to know what that was. This seems like a really big deal. Like, what's happening? And yeah, I don't like that either in the contrast of like the entire franchise, because they always are like revealing what it is they're like looking for and going after, and it's usually very well known what's happening in terms of like the objects they need to obtain or this, that, or the other. So yeah, it was really weird that it was just given this like really vague name that sounds like really cool and like bad, but like no payoff really. Like
well, even in the end they make a joke of it where Tom Cruise goes to Lawrence Fishburne. He's like, "What's the rabbit's foot?" And Lawrence Fishburne's like, "If you stay on, I'll tell you." And Ethan's just like, I'm retiring, I'm getting married, and I'm like, fuck you, come on, you even brought it up just to take it away from us.
Yeah,
And
like that's super lame. And we would just
yeah,
I think too, it would just like make everything more intense if we knew the stakes. Like, what is
right,
it? You know?
yeah,
It is lame.
yeah, that was one thing that I think was one of the main mistakes of the movie. Like we said, though, probably the bigger one, and it changes later, is the fact that it turns into just a damsel in distress savior movie. But I mainly just really enjoy this movie because it steered it in the right direction. And then as we talk the next episode on 456, like if this one didn't happen, those other ones may not have ever even been made. And I think the next director, Brad Bird, was able to take what JJ kind of laid down and take it from there. And then we were off to the races to like, from this point forward, I personally believe, and we'll talk about it later and like maybe ranking these, the franchise gets better from this point forward.
Yes, consistently. Every movie gets better. That's what I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Like the first one's not the worst. The second one is, but then like the first and the third are kind of towards the bottom. I think we can both agree on that. And then 4, 5, 6 just get nuts.
And I would honestly say, like, if Philip Seymour Hoffman wasn't the villain in the third one, it would, like, that's what gets it. Like, I mean, that's what really elevates it. And that's why I don't want to put it so low, because he's so good. If it was a different villain, I don't know.
It's funny because everyone says that. Everyone I know says, they're like, well, the third one's one of the best because Philip Seymour Hoffman. Like, that's literally what they say. It has nothing to do with JJ's direction or the plot. It's always because of his performance. And this is one of the only movies that has, like, a captivating villain.
Yeah, and that's just something he does. I feel like Philip Seymour Hoffman, it's like when he was in movies, it was like, that's what you saw. Like, The Master, the movie sucks. I'm sorry. But, like, Philip Seymour Hoffman is amazing. So he just has that effect on movies. And I think definitely with this one, he really just elevated the movie even more to be what it was and, like, up there with the other ones, kind of.
Yeah. So, would you say right now your ranking is 3-1-2 as far as like your favorite?
I'd say it's 2-2-2 all the way, 2 forever. No, definitely would say right now the ranking with these 3 is 3-1-2.
Great. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we're gonna see how that keeps growing as we go through 4, 5, 6 in the next episode. Please let us know what you think of the franchise. I knew that this, compared to the next episode, was going to be very interesting because it's this weird ebb and flow of like high, low, really high, you know, which this never happens. How often is the third movie considered one of the best and second one considered the worst? It's just bananas, and we're going to keep going with this franchise in the next episode. But yeah, Jess, until the next one, where can they find you on the social medias?
On Instagram and Twitter, I am at Jess Kwazz, JessKwazz.
And you can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Brandon Prosek. Please follow Entertainment Buffet. Subscribe on YouTube. If you're listening on YouTube, the podcast is also on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, you know, all the places that you usually can find podcasts. And we're going to have tons of video content coming to Entertainment Buffet's YouTube, sketches and a variety of videos coming there. So please subscribe, check that out. And this has been episode 82, and we'll join you in next episode on our mission to watch the Mission Impossible movies.